Hey everybody, welcome back to the WWB podcast. I have on one of the most talented, brilliant comedians in the world. And I hate to sound like a hype man, but he is extremely talented. Excellent writer, Forbes, Bleacher Report, Alfred Quinoa.
Great to be here. I always love the applause.
Yeah, it's the only button I know how to use on my Roadcaster, so I have to I can't do anything. We're going to talk about the Jheri Curl, and specifically the greatest Jheri Curls in pro wrestling history. To get it started, for those who do not know what the Jheri Curl is, it is a popular hairstyle that was popular in the 80s, and some guys tried to keep it through the 90s as well. A lot of people think it's a black person thing that invented it, but it wasn't. The Jheri Curl is a permanent wave hairstyle invented by hairdresser Jerry Redding. So when we think about the Jheri Curl, we think about Ice Cube, Pulp Fiction,
Classic.
Famous Jheri Curls. So that'll give you a context of that. So also Deion Sanders was a famous Jheri Curl guy as well. So me and Alfred devised a list of the famous wrestling Jheri Curls, and we're going to get into that now. Alfred, who were we going to start with here?
Doom, Ron Simmons, Butch Reed. I mean, I think we got to put them in terms of some of the greatest Jheri Curls of all time.
No question about it. The things that I want to get your perspective on Doom. Talk a little bit more about what made Ron Simmons' Jheri Curl even more badass.
I think if you're talking about how juicy should a Jheri Curl be, Ron Simmons absolutely captures that. And also, the guy could bump in his Jheri Curls. He could do spots. He was doing it perfectly, and it did not become the center of attention. So he did not make the Jheri Curl the star of his matches, but it was hard to ignore. So I think Ron Simmons was one with his Jheri Curl, and we got to give him credit for that.
No question about it. And the nice thing about Ron is he understood how to accessorize his Jheri Curl, no doubt, with the headband around the Jheri Curl, adding a little, sparatuzza in the words of my Italian brother. So that's really cool as well. And another thing too about Ron is don't let the curls fool you. He will whoop your ass. Let's talk about Butch Reed and unheralded Jheri Curl. No doubt he's part of Doom. A lot of people don't appreciate his as much as they do Ron, but kind of give me your perspective.
Yeah, and that's kind of fitting and on brand for Butch Reed. Is he is one of the most underappreciated wrestlers ever, and that includes his Jheri Curl as well. I think his Jheri Curl is pretty lit. I think he knew what he was doing. Again, standing next to Ron Simmons, it's hard to really appreciate that Jheri Curl, but when we're talking about the length, I think that is something that makes it a little bit inferior to Ron Simmons, is that Butch Reed's Jheri Curl was packed in there pretty tight, and the length wasn't as long, but it was still a very formidable Jheri Curl. It was a very underrated Jheri Curl, and much like Butch Reed, it was a very strong and powerful Jheri Curl.
No doubt. He did not skip arm days at all. So the power behind the Jheri Curl, he had a Super Saiyan-like Jheri Curl. In the same group, we had Teddy Long. I like Teddy Long's Jheri Curl because it's giving sleazy car salesman.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually have been trying to look at pictures of Teddy Long's Jheri Curl, but it blocked me on Twitter, so I don't know what it looks like.
Yes, the Twitter trolls have gotten a hold of his Twitter and prevented you from enjoying the Teddy Long's luscious locks. But talk about Teddy Long as a historical figure and why, being part of Doom, even though he was a manager, his Jheri Curl still played its part as well.
Teddy Long's Jheri Curl, we know him as the bald Teddy Long.
Yes.
This generation, if you're a 90s kid, you're coming up, maybe even in the 2000s, and you remember the GM Teddy Long, you remember him for being bald, but this man did have a very, very strong hair game that was topped off with this Jheri Curl. Oftentimes, he put it in a do-rag. So it was he didn't want to style him too much because as a manager, you're supposed to be the background, and he knew that unveiling that Jheri Curl would have stolen the whole show. So very magnanimous man, Teddy Long, but he was very strategic in when he let you see those Jheri Curls. But I appreciated that.
He let his Jheri Curl flag fly, no question about it. It's giving Waffle House employee that makes the best fried catfish. That's what I'm getting from him.
Yeah, I'm getting a deacon that falls into the parking lot when you don't give him the tithes.
It's giving me Men's Warehouse 1983 suit salesman vibes. People always think that Jheri Curl is only specific to the African-American community, but let's talk about the Jheri Curl's racial diversity and this entrance into the list of Jheri Curl in the words of Chris Jericho.
Hey, white representation, ladies and gentlemen. Look at us. We're magnanimous too. We're doing white representation with Jheri Curl. Not just the brothers and sisters are going to have these Jheri Curls now, because Sid Vicious had one of the best sets of Jheri Curls in wrestling history. Yes, that Sid Vicious, who infamously broke his leg. But before he did that, I'm sure he was breaking a lot of girls' hearts with that wonderful Jheri curl. You can call it cultural appropriation if you want. I don't. I just feel like Sid had a look, Sid had curls, and he used them to his advantage, and he had Jheri curls. That's what Sid Vicious did have a great set of Jheri curls, especially for a white man.
Oh, of course. He was a Nordic Jheri curl god, so to speak. And many would say, the reason he broke his leg is because he was slipping on his Jheri curl juice as he was making his descent. We don't know the specifics about that, but it is a possibility behind the scenes. We would probably see Dark Side of the Ring of wrestling Jheri curls and injuries in the 1980s. His Jheri curl, pound for pound, I think it could go toe-to-toe with many of the brothers. We're going to hop down to another Jheri curl, a Jheri curl that definitely doesn't skip protein day or protein shakes. We're going to talk about Tony Atlas. Tony Atlas, known for being a bodybuilder, but also a Jheri curl to the gods. Talk about his unconventional Jheri curl, not necessarily the stereotypical Jheri curl, what we expect in terms of length and style, but give me your perspective of Tony Atlas's Jheri curl glory.
I feel like Tony Atlas just barely qualifies for a Jheri curl because it is, if you really look at it, it is a Jheri curl. It's like upon further review, I feel like if he was in football, they'd throw a flag and they'd have to look into the booth and they'd have to challenge the Jheri curl, and we'd have to go through 2 commercial breaks, and then finally they would say the ruling on the field stands. It is a Jheri curl. So yes, it is technically a Jheri curl.
No question about it. He did a Jheri curl on his own terms, no doubt. He was a Jheri curl rebel, as you would speak, and we have to give and acknowledge him in history. It's not Black history, but we have to acknowledge it in history. He's one of the more radical rebel Jheri curls of his time. Now we're going to hop down to another Jheri curl, a person that many of us love for his catchphrases, his success in Hollywood, but many people don't know about the early years of this gentleman's Jheri curl. I'm going to hand it over to you, Alfred. Let's talk about this entrance into the Jheri curl of the list of Jheri curl.
Well, before there was the People's Champion, there was the People's Jheri curl, because Rocky Maivia came out on the scene in New York in the world's most famous arena, not in the 80s, in the 90s, and he rocked a Jheri curl. I don't know what anybody else wants to call it, if they're saying that is a Samoan haircut. Well, no. He was wearing a Jheri curl for his wrestling debut. A lot of people have bad memories of Rocky Maivia compared to what The Rock did in terms of his career. I was a kid, so I was still at that age where I just kind of went along with whoever WWE was pushing, and I loved Rocky Maivia as a kid. I had his action figure, and I absolutely loved his Jheri curl.
He had we would call it a Terry curl because of the taper on the side. It was of a tapered nature, and no doubt one of the most valuable Jheri curls of his in the world now at this point. Should be in the Smithsonian as well. The follicles that he had, that haircut, no question about it. You've seen Kid and Play kind of do different variations as well with the all natural poof ball, but no doubt the Samoan swirl there attached to it added an extra little panache to Rocky Maivia's Jheri curl. Finally, we're going to talk about a person who's really, his Jheri curl might supersede even his promos, which is hard to say. Dusty, hard times and being a poet's son. Let's talk about Dusty. Not only was he a great figure of the 1980s, a person who had that Southern Baptist type voice, a great promo, great champion, and no doubt he's produced Cody Luther King as well. But talk about Dusty Rhodes and the importance of his Jheri curl, especially representation of white male oblong body shapes in the 1980s.
Yes, and Dusty Rhodes was great about him is he was about that life. It wasn't cultural appropriation. He was taking every step possible to make sure that the culture was represented, whether it was wearing those Huggy Bear pimp jackets, whether it was wearing the hat, whether it was kissing Sapphire on TV, which was taboo then. You could argue it's still taboo in terms of interracial kissing, but Dusty Rhodes took that woman, kissed the hell out of her, and he was at the cookout for life with me. And on top of all that, Dusty Rhodes also had a wonderful Jheri curl, which does compete as one of the greatest of all time. Now, what's different about Dusty's Jheri curl, which you can take this to Jheri curl court, and maybe you might have a case, with a good enough lawyer, you can win this case.
Judge Mathis would like to talk about it. Yep, Judge Mathis.
Judge Mathis would like to have a word with you about Dusty Rhodes' Jheri curl, because as we were talking about, what really makes a Jheri curl is moistness. it's got to be wet. You got to spray. You know, Jheri Curl and the Jheri Curl juice is one and the same. And Dusty Rhodes did not have that Jheri Curl juice.
No question, and no doubt. Him and his he also popularized the bladed Jheri Curl. Him and blading, so the blurry curl because of the blood that he would wear with his hair. It was very special. He took it to another. He was an artiste of the Jheri Curl, not just on promos, but also with his ability to take blood and to add it to his wonderful, luscious locks. So we have covered the wonderful Jheri Curls in the history of pro wrestling. What a time to be alive. Any final words, Alfred?
I really love doing this. I love the list of Jheri Curls. I think it's a very underrated aspect of wrestling. I don't think people's wrestling hairstyles in general get enough attention, let alone Jheri Curl. So this is what I think is an important aspect of wrestling that was overlooked for so long, but we finally did the list. We might have to do a part two, you know? I mean, it's a lot of Jheri Curls out there.
Yeah, it's a menagerie of Jheri Curl. It's a Jheri Curl jam, no question about it. And guys, we're going to keep making cool stuff, and it's enjoyable to have a person who has a distinguished taste in Jheri Curls, and we'll continue to give you wonderful content of this nature. So, guys, thanks for this new episode of not only my buddy Alfred and myself. This will be more collaborations in the future.